Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TruthWorks. I'm Jessica Neal, and Patty is still out recovering from her surgery, so I'm going solo. But I have two guests today, which I'm very excited about. So some of you have heard of these two individuals, but I have Byron Loflin and Mark Thompson here. They're the co-authors of a really cool book called CEO Ready, What You Need to Know to Earn the Job and Keep the Job. I think that's the most important part. Kind of keep that job. It's a hard job to get, but you want to try to keep it. So I am so excited to have you guys here. We have a lot of listeners that are CEOs, founders, but we have just a lot of listeners that are leaders. And I think that the advice that you give translates not just to a CEO, but to all leaders in general. So I'm excited to have you guys here. Can you, first of all, tell us a little bit about how the two of you met and how this all came about? Because I don't even know how you know each other. What is this story? Tell us how this happened.
Well, it's a delight to be able to work with Byron because Byron and I are like bookends in the boardroom because he's the most preeminent expert on board excellence and governance and created a wonderful company that was focused on that and then sold that to Nasdaq and has led that at Nasdaq for many years. And I'm the other end of the bookend because I'm a CEO coach. So I'll be invited, he'd be coming out of the boardroom and I'd be walking in, and I'm here to try to help the current CEO keep her job and help the grooming of the next candidates in the line. But the way we actually met was a delightful happenstance. I think we were at the House of Lords, weren't we, Byron?
That's right. I was walking in and he was walking out of the House of Lords.
And then what happened?
In Parliament.
Okay. And what happened? You just were like, hey.
We realized that we were both in similar orbits and had been for at least a couple of decades, I think. And we were able to validate that. Do you know so-and-so? And and who are you going to see? Well, we were just leaving a meeting with Lord Michael Hastings, who's been a good friend of Byron's for many years. Turns out the 3 degrees separation don't actually exist. We had the same ecosystem.
I'm sure you did. And it is such a small world. So, and for the two of you doing what you do, how did you not know all the same circle of people? So, but it's one thing to kind of meet each other, in this kind of very fancy place and then decide to write a book together.
We've had the privilege of doing so much coaching, Byron with boards and me with CEOs. And the serendipity was to realize that in all cases, Byron, how would you describe it? One of the main functions of the governance of a board is to hire and fire the chief executive. And my job is to help the hiring piece.
Right.
And the firing piece. How would you characterize it, Byron?
I was quite instantly taken. Mark and his wife Bonita were together, and you know how you get a sense of people when a couple's together in a professional environment like that, because you don't always see it. It's social. But they had been in a meeting, and I could tell there was something special. And I knew a little bit about Mark before, but this idea that Mark's referencing, that the CEO ascendancy to being in that position and then the transition that starts as someone becomes CEO, we hadn't focused on it. I heard considerable lament from board members. This process needs to change a bit, and it needs to be thought of as longer term. I heard one day an example is in the automobile business, it takes about 5 years for a life cycle of a model. And if we're rotating CEOs every 4.5 years, we've got maybe a disconnect there. Mm-hmm. So seeing afterwards, Mark and I agreed to connect, and we quickly found this idea. I mean, it's a bit of the bookends is an image of it, is how we could somehow someday work together. We met, by the way, in 2019. And then since then, what we tested is we started to convene dinners and lunches. Mark came to a lot of our activities at Nasdaq, helped sponsor and help host some of those. And we found a quick connection around our relationship and our passion for helping CEOs, both on their journey to becoming ready. That's where the name comes from, and continuing that forward, particularly in Mark's professional work.
Well, I just love that story. I mean, you're just kind of walking by each other, meet and have similar passions, write a book and a great book. So let's talk a little bit about, the CEO role. I think maybe I'm on boards now and I work at a VC firm and we talk about having great CEOs all the time. But I think that there might be a misconception out in the world about what is actual turnover like in these roles. Is it frequent? There is so much on the line when you get it wrong, when you're hiring a CEO. And I know the board feels tremendous pressure to get the right person in there. And so talk to us a little bit about like what's the turnover normally like and how should leaders be thinking about this, but boards be thinking about this role?
Well, the notion that there used to be a belief that you could plan to install a CEO and make sure they were successful forever, for decades and decades, in the kind of world that we're looking at today, there's just so much change and disruption. And I don't think there's a day that you could look in the paper and not see someone leaving.
Yeah.
Or someone expelled.
Right.
Some major event. I mean, it's a brand name.
Yeah, don't get on the camera at the concert.
Right.
Ouch.
We live in a fishbowl. What's authenticity mean in that context? We need to be really, evangelizing the development of our people and our brand. And the turnover rate has never been higher right now. And there's so much at stake for a board, billions in shareholder value that can be affected. And then there's been so little preparation, to Byron's point. It should be a program that's continuous where you're always developing that next in line to work their way up through the company and then hopefully to lead the company. And yet about a third of all CEOs are interim. So that means they were caught by surprise and they needed to do a temporary fix and lead the company. Well, that also creates further disruption. I mean, Byron, when you're thinking about that turnover, we were talking a little bit about that earlier in some correspondence today, about the impact on the company and how disruptive it is.
And it's impact on that person's life.
Yeah.
Meaning that I never want us to lose and try to emphasize, I work for a CEO now, having been a CEO and a smaller company, but that person has a difficult job.
Mm-hmm.
And are there ways in which I can help make that job easier, better, elevate the integrity, help foster the culture that helps to provide that trust framework that's important in an organization? Because CEO, particularly in a large organization today, very busy person. And they have choices every day, and we can help augment those choices. So part of the readiness process is, I think, those who are interested in possibly being CEO someday, are you augmenting or are you undermining? Is one start, because there's also that egotistical approach where you're thinking, oh, how do I get there quicker?
Yeah, I can be that. I can do that.
Yeah.
It's easy. To your point, it's a very hard job and I think a very lonely job. And, I do CEO coaching as well. And I work with a lot of founders and the weight of the world is upon them. You have shareholders, you have employees, you have decisions, you have millions of dollars in ARR on the line all the time. So what's this? Can you give us we'll talk a little bit about the loneliness and who should be ready for this, but talk to me a little bit about the augmenting part. Do you really want this job, right? Or do you just think it's like a thing that you need to check off the box? Because I don't think it's for everybody.
I was talking to Arthur Levinson, who's Apple's chairman today, and he was recruited by Steve Jobs to join that board and then became chairman of Apple. And he was running Genentech. And twice he faced just the crisis you're describing, Jessica. And that is this really a job you want? He says, I am a scientist. I came here to cure cancer. I have a mission. Bob Swanson, who was founder of Genentech, had one of those cancers and actually didn't see the dream fulfilled, but was able to fund it. And it took several tries to convince Arthur to become CEO of Genentech, because he said, I belong in a lab and I've got many, many people that I'm working with. I'm collaborating with them. I really want to fundamentally change the way we see certain cancers. And he was working and making progress on that. And then he visited many times with the board, but the most effective meeting was with his spouse on both occasions when she said, okay, so if that is really your objective, how best do you think that could be served by Genentech being a great company and having great scientists and that you understand them better than anyone? So one of the chapters in our book is completely focused on this idea that really great, capable people, being a CEO isn't for everybody. And I think, Byron, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of our best candidates are the ones who actually check themselves in the mirror before they decide to go ahead with this, because there are a lot of trade-offs and a lot of sacrifices. As you say, it's lonely, it's risky, it can take you away from what, in Arthur's case, was his core mission in life, and yet it also could be, and hopefully is, the most rewarding gig of your life in being able to have creating a more permanent, lasting place for that organization. So, but I love it when I hear people doubt themselves first. That's what, as a coach, you'd hope the most is that you have the humility to say, so what will this really take? Rather than just being a prize to be won, it's a job to be done. As Nita Thompson, my spouse that Byron referred to, she's a professor of organizational leadership and an author as well.
She sounds smart.
Our best material comes from.
Well, most of, yes, I think that's true for my husband as well.
Jessica, this we hear this often mentioned, this concept of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's in there.
But if we stop and think about it for a minute, there's a quick antidote to imposter syndrome, and that is humility, as Mark was mentioning, and not trying to make oneself something that we aren't. Mm-hmm. We're not little gods. We're human beings, and the difference between us is much more slim than it is wide in terms of we try to widen the chasm, but we're between, say, a CEO and somebody who's working on the line somewhere. I've met people that they've just chosen not to be CEOs. They could have been, but it's a lot. But importantly to this point is that having good friends, maintaining integrity, having people in the organization that you can rely upon to have honest exchanges. The trend that I am seeing is in the boardroom and in the C-suite. More interaction and more authenticity in that interaction drives a more high performance and interesting culture, because you're almost always going to have a few people vying for that next position. Mm-hmm. But are they vying for it in a way of high integrity, or are they vying for it in a way that's trying to undercut or undermine the other? Fostering a culture that the best person wins and the other person even loves the fact that they won, to use Arthur Brooks' language today. He's talking a lot more about love in the boardroom or in the C-suite or in the business. I think it's fascinating to hear that kind of language being used all of a sudden.
I love that. I actually started using that at Netflix because we were a very critical culture. We didn't celebrate very often. It was always like, okay, well, that was fine, but what can we do better? What can we do better? And I was like, we need to give love to each other on our strengths. And I think we often forget that. So I'm glad that that's happening in the boardroom, because I think boards need a little love. I don't know, all boards are different, but and all board members can be a little different. They all have things that they are interested in or the thing that they want to push on, right? And there's different independent board members versus, some of the VC board members that come on, board that are investors. But what do you think? And I think self-awareness is such a critical part of being a great leader in general, but especially a CEO, and humility. But what have you guys seen in the pattern recognition that you have of great CEOs? Like, what is it that sets them apart from some of the others? Because there's obviously average CEOs that are fine, but then there's exceptional CEOs. What is it that you find in the exceptional CEOs?
I've found that for years now that the thing that makes a difference is that they are really believers in developing people and the teams that they bring together that can collaborate at scale, because nobody does anything worthwhile alone. Nobody. And it's all in that job. It's not about being the subject matter expert. It's now being the kind of chief facilitator and chief guide, sometimes architect, and someone who really loves the people on the team enough to help them grow into the roles they have, and has the humility to always hire people better than themselves in each of those functions.
Yeah, that is very true. They often don't do that. I think we were generally pretty good at that at Netflix. In terms of, I guess, succession and kind of talking about, hiring the team beneath you, many companies don't do this well. It's very, very hard. And a lot of boards try to have a plan. A lot of companies try to have a plan. You sort of have your up and comers, but I have found that in succession, it's rare that there's an obvious one for the CEO seat. There's some contenders, but they're not quite ready. Maybe they could be ready. We have an interim plan. We might have to go external.
Yeah. Byron does a survey that he started many years ago. We might talk a little bit about how, and I was shocked to hear the data on it. Even most recently, coming out of Nasdaq, about I think only half of companies have a succession plan, and only half of those can actually send you a copy of it.
Yeah, we do an annual governance pulse kind of survey out to boards and CEOs, and the need for succession planning is in high demand. But I do think that it's trending, that we're starting to understand this. And the erroneous ethos of succession in the past was that it was some sort of tapping,
Yeah,
a tapping ceremony.
Yeah,
There
like
was
you're
almost some
anointed.
sort of
Yeah,
anointing. Exactly.
yeah,
And it needs to be, and the best are now engaging this as ongoing. So it never stops, because it'd be very sad for a company to lose their CEO in an emergency circumstance and not be ready, because there's a whole line of people waiting to say, what? Wait a second, you weren't ready for this? Like, which part of emergency don't you understand about the whole, we use the term getting hit by the bus, and
yeah.
it means a lot of different things all the time. So it's these realities that set in the boardroom, and they're saying, we've got to do this better. So it's an ongoing transition period of periods in the life cycle of CEO-dom, rather than it's stop, start, stop, start. So this whole idea of a continuum that has periodic transitions of a new person coming in, and building that as a part of the ethos of the board, that it is a planning process that's ongoing and revisited every year, sometimes a couple times a year as it draws near. Other times a little more drawn out if you've just ensconced someone. Probably things have changed enough that you need to revisit the emergency plan at least once or twice a year in a formal function, where it's said, we approve this plan and we can go to the street with it if necessary at some point in the future.
Yeah, I think
There's
that's
a couple of people who are heroes of mine that do what Byron's talking about, and they've institutionalized it, so it kind of takes the ego or the urgency out of it, in the sense, Enrique Lores, who I work with, as he was on the short list to become the new CEO of HP. And, they've gone through their cycles and transformations, and he's done an amazing job since he was in seat. And what he institutionalized was this program where there would be senior executives who were the high potentials, who would always be in the running to be elevated, because it's not just the CEO, it's everyone else in the C-suite and beyond. If they're moving up from the inside, everybody needs to have that anchor, that solid successor in that succession plan, so that it isn't up to him or the priorities of the day, because there's always a crisis. There's always. Right? There's a big capital allocation thing, or there's often, he or she's not leaving as CEO for a while. So yeah, we have the backfill. If they get hit by a bus, we'll put this person in there. But he wanted to take that off the table and say, hey, we have a continuous process. And as a part of Byron's governance with the board of, looking at succession plans with some frequency, it's institutional at HP. Same true as at Best Buy. Corey Berry's not going anywhere. She's the new Best Buy CEO, who filled very big shoes of Hubert Joly. And they said, no, we're institutionalizing this pipeline so that we weren't going to get caught like everyone else when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. And I was on a public board where I wouldn't say it was institutionalized, but we regularly did it once a year and were reflective on it. And we certainly were at Netflix. I mean, Reed
Yes.
was But
And that's
often it's, you know, it is kind of morbid to do the hit the bus thing. I would always get a little sad. I'm like, Reed, I don't want you to get hit by a bus. Like, I want you to be with us forever. But it is important, and I think it's important to recognize those that may be in the pipeline, so that you are developing them, and you're getting them that access to that type of work, or you're getting them access to that type of coaching, so that, again, you're not anointed, it's not happening, but if it were to, you might be ready.
Reed was one of those, I think, more gifted in that regard, because here he is, larger than life. He had another partner who was a big part of the founding of Netflix. And today you've got co-CEOs there who
We
are
do.
world class. And they both were tested through this kind of pipeline of leadership development, each who are part of some of the biggest crucibles and transitions of Netflix. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
one, they
they were.
both,
And when we first started talking about that transition, me and Reed, I was like, they're not ready. But we really did come up with a plan to, with coaching and with things to, and I think people think that sometimes these things are, sort of decided in the moment and then they happen. This was something that we thought about for
very intentional.
5, 6, 7
Yeah,
years,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you talk about the first 100 days being so crucial. And let's say, we're a board, we're a company, we just got a new CEO. What do we do? How do we set this person up for success?
Well, hopefully, part of this ends up being the fact that you've been investing for the last year or 18
Hopefully.
months. It's usually when I get hired by
Yeah.
board members. Or you're thinking, Byron, about this, is that the first 100 days should be a reflection of the plan. One of the wonderful drills that you do for candidates, and Harvard Business Review just asked us to write an article about this. They were focused on this idea of how do you really get these people in the right place and in the right mindset, and actually do the assessment early enough. And part of it is to write a vision memo, which has a bold vision for the company, because every company is trying to go through massive change. And so that memo is what you actually pitch to be in contention to become CEO. And it has a first 100 days, and then it has the next 1,000, which may be just as important, because the first 100 days, yes, that's really critical, but it's not really a full reflection of, as Byron often talks about with boards, you're playing a long game and you're building a company that can really drive change for a long period of time. What do you think, Byron?
Well, and I'm not a CEO coach of official capacity, so this is a third party overview. Even though
Yeah, I
I
think you
already like you,
qualify as the
You
CEO
do.
coach.
I already like you, Jessica. So I imagine you do a great job. But I know what Mark does, and I've gotten feedback on what Mark does independently. I would emphasize that if you want to be in the game today, and you're thinking about that 100 days, to Mark's point, you need to have had a coach for a year or 2 or 3 before, really preparing you for that vision and testing it and helping you stress test that vision. Because I think the implied point, that 100 days it's like 100-yard dash for 100 days. And the exhaustion level, if you're not prepared, could wear out some people, and it takes them a while to recover. And I've observed people, and Mark and I have talked about this, that when they look at it with that approach, and they've got the support of a coach and they've got the support of the other teammates behind them, it's a much more relaxed than overly stressful environment.
It's a great point. And when you think about elite athletes, probably that's the easiest metaphor, because the game is won before you step on the court, right? I was one of Venus's coaches. She'd have 4 at any given time and one for business. And I served in that role. And it was really clear the preparation didn't come in those 100-minute games. They came leading up to it. So you've got to
Yeah.
perform well on the court. The issue is, have we invested, as to Byron's point, in that person, so that we actually have a prayer of success in that sprint in the first 100 days?
Yeah. I'll ask this question because sometimes you get to promote from within, and sometimes you have to hire externally. It would be hard to have that type of preparation if you got an external person.
You need to run them all through the same test. So
Uh-huh.
the focuses of the article that we just wrote, they were kind of fascinated because I was saying the headhunter now is also playing a huge role as one of your key jurors in selecting you. And so they run the internal candidates and the external candidates through the same psychometric testing, business scenario testing. They all have to pitch the board with that 5-page genius memo on the 100 days plus 1,000 days. And we were just advising Byron and I in this article that we were also impressed by those who took even a bolder look at selling the future by behaving like an activist investor. So you're
Those
right.
activists.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's inevitable. You're going to get,
Yep.
if you aren't leading the change, somebody's going to help you with that.
Whether you want it or not.
So everybody gets the same test, and it's still why more than 75% are hired from inside for the reason we're just talking about here, because there's more context, you can run more drills. But the outside also has the appeal of being the great hope, the knight in shining armor, who may or may not metaphorically have done this sort of transformation
Somewhere else, right? Yeah.
So there's kind of an extra sex appeal around that external candidate always, because you don't actually know how clumsy the executive was as you do the internal executive who had to go up here.
Yeah, you know where the bodies are buried. Is there, so 75% are promoted from within?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a success rate that you see from external versus internal? Is it more, do you have a higher success rate doing an internal promotion, or is it kind of about the same?
It's a little bit higher because for all the reasons that we've described, there should be more context.
Yeah, they know the culture, they know the people.
Right.
Right. What in that 100 days, because I was just imagining, like, if I was a CEO and, you kind of are this, like, when you get anointed, everybody, and I tell CEOs like this all the time, like, whether or not you think so, now you are godlike, because everybody is looking at you as like this God, this person who knows it all, this savior, and you're not. So we know that, but they're not treating you that way. And in that first 100 days, they're sort of waiting and watching and just looking to see if you make a mistake. Right? Or if you're kind of a hypocrite, like you say one thing, but you're actually doing another. What is it where they can lose faith from the board, from the employees? Where is it that they kind of get lost in this process and maybe don't get off on the right foot?
Well, let me weigh in first, and then I want Byron to talk about this from Byron's firsthand experience in the boardroom when you're vetting people like this. I think about this almost in the context of the boomerang, say, CEO. So where I've seen a lot of stumbles is when there's such an implied mandate that the new executive comes rushing in because there's a lot to be done very quickly. But assuming that everyone's in alignment, that he's got the whole organization running with him. I think about Starbucks, or I think about changes at Disney, where there were situations where Howard was involved with the executive early on, was groomed by him, and he didn't have the time really to get the buy-in and alignment of all the teams and the culture. He had to go quickly into the markets and quickly through the organization to try to win hearts and minds. So where I see it going south is where you can't do the kind of work where you're assessing and interviewing and having the humility to do the deep listening tour, because that disarms part of what people are watching you so closely about is that they're desperate to be relevant. They're desperate to have a word. They should be. That's why you hired them. So, Byron's usually a part of the kind of listening tour. Wouldn't you agree about, Byron, how the board needs to be listening, the executive needs to be making the tour at all levels and helping them to be successful in understanding what's happening?
And I hope this is widely held, and that is kind of looking at, they're going to be employees, we are going to be looking at it, investors and other stakeholders, through a vision, mission, values, and goals oriented set of criteria. And if you set the vision, as Mark's already mentioned, but then there's the mission. How are we going to implement that? How are we going to the marketplace? What are our goals in the marketplace? And what are your values? So, speaking to the first 100 days, if you can lay out your vision, the mission that you're engaging, whether or not it's adding to, new, or continuing on, and establishing what are the values that you hold dear, what really means a lot to you, and then from there that you're setting clear goals that people can say, "I'm excited about this." That's what goals do. They should do is get people excited about things that they want to accomplish and willingness to go beyond what they had if that CEO is delivering on the inspiration, hopefully that they are able to deliver, that it's causing people to to go beyond.
And I think, and you guys talk about this in the book, but there's an aspect of emotional intelligence in this
Mhm.
role. And I'm sure the three of us, we've met many a CEO in our careers, and some are very well equipped with that, and some are not. How important is emotional intelligence to being successful in this role?
Well, it is. They have to be able to function at a very deep technical level. That's usually how they got where they are. Especially if you're working with startups and founders, you've got a disproportionate number of technical experts, don't you?
Dude, I do.
Engineers, science.
And Reed was, you know.
Yes, exactly. So you came because they came to this because they could solve a problem for customers better. They had a better way, and that was often an engineering problem. And often they could speak the language very well in that science space. The reason that they stood out and they were able to rally out of those was because they weren't only high in IQ, they were high in EQ. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have a role to play at all if there wasn't some development work to be done.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Because I can't teach, Reed to be a better scientist or engineer.
But you
we
can
talk
teach
about how to
EQ.
talk.
Exactly. Byron, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Just briefly to kind of follow is that there's sort of a common assumption that you fall heavily on one side or the other, EQ versus IQ. I would argue I've been having been in boardrooms and hearing people talk, because I talk to managers and boards often about the CEO. I've heard considerably more change around CEOs learning to be more EQ oriented. And that's an interesting trend. And I would say that enough data's in. You can learn to be more EQ oriented and understanding.
Yeah, you can, for sure.
It's a really great point, Byron, and I think it's worth anchoring across the spectrum of leadership that we do tend to categorize people as, well, she's good at this and he's good at that. That's not really how it works. If you're a CEO, you've learned in the College of Hard Knocks in many cases, and then you've survived. When Benita was writing her dissertation on collaboration, she found out that only 9 out of 10 folks learned from the College of Hard Knocks. They didn't learn in a class how to collaborate, and they survived and they got better. And if they didn't get better, we're not talking about them today.
Right. That's so true. It's so true. Do you think, so for first time CEOs, what do you think is the hardest for them to learn? Is it sort of the governance of all things, like dealing with ISS investors, like activists, like or is it really just sort of that learning curve of how to be that well-rounded CEO that can be inspirational, rally the troops, actually move the metrics?
That's really that's
All of the above.
all of the above. You just about covered chapter 1 through 10 for sure, because everybody has something different to learn. Not everybody has every skill as well developed as the others. So just a great, easy to understand example would be about 40% of CEOs come from being a CFO. And so that makes a lot of sense. They understand the shareholders, they understand how to fund the company, they understand the ISS, they understand all of the dynamics in terms of shareholder value. And if you can't produce on that level, you ain't got any future in this job. Having said that, maybe they haven't run a business or have really had to be an operator with a P&L. So, for example, with Corey Berry at Best Buy, she was a great CFO and still is a great CFO. What did she need to add was more P&L experience. So that's what Hubert gave her. And then she just rocked the turnaround of the Geek Squad and really able to really demonstrate her mojo there, learn a lot. She was one of those people who actually sent a letter back to Hubert, a 7-page letter back, 1 page saying I'm qualified for this job, 6 pages saying I'm not. And it's it's a Harvard Business School case history now.
Yeah.
Everybody has something to learn, which is why we think, both from a board standpoint in Byron's case and from a CEO standpoint in mine, we all have something to develop. If we started as an operator, we need to learn more of the street. If we started on the street, we need to be more of an operator, because we need to be a CEO for the entire enterprise.
Yeah.
And lighting up those hearts and minds to lead the
And
company.
I go back to this, but it's a really hard job, and it's hard to be all those things all the time.
Absolutely.
And you're being pulled in so many different directions. And speaking of like CFO to CEO, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I always they are ready from sort of a P&L investor perspective, but I also see a lot of folks that get promoted from CFO struggle with the inspiration and the rallying and the
Exactly.
doesn't come naturally to them. And the innovation side.
Right. I mean, you're a financial expert, and maybe you've done deals and so forth, so you do have lots of great instincts and you've learned many, many things. But if you haven't run a major operation or have had the opportunity to lead R&D, setting the budget isn't the same as actually lighting up some new ways of doing things. So we go on that's why, as Byron said, we try to spend that year ahead or 2 years ahead, making sure that we explore all those other areas, because then you can also find out whether you want to opt in or not for this enterprise-wide level of understanding. It's almost like taking a bunch of language classes and deciding, oh, I like all those languages, but that's not the same as the one I was speaking as a CFO.
Right. Okay. I love all this. Okay. I keep asking you tons of questions, but I'm going to ask one about boards. What should boards be doing differently other than succession, pushing on succession? What should they be doing differently today? And this doesn't even have to be in the guise of CEO. You guys are in boardrooms and working with board members all the time. How can board members be more productive coaches and influencers of the business? Because, again, some are more involved, some are less involved, some only care about one thing, and some boards don't work as a team.
Do you want me to take this one first?
Yeah, I mean, this is in your lane.
This is in my lane. So I will reflect on direct things that I've heard and seen change dramatically. One is I am surprised, but we're seeing a significant trend towards the positive, that board members need to take the time to go together to facilities, whatever that facility is, the production studio, the mine, where the product is produced, and meet the people. And somebody hopefully listening to this, Jessica, is one of the people that's done that, will be smiling and saying, yeah, that's me. Because the groups that are doing that, the feedback from management, it is excitement. And that excitement goes down through the organization. So that's one, get out. It's not just in the boardroom on the top of a building. And number two is the amount of people that you're getting to know in the organization on a semi-formal basis. So the CEO is bringing in not just 8 people, not just say 10 or 12. They're bringing in not all at once, but on some basis, closer to 20, 30 people in a decent sized organization, so that the board is getting a chance to know people and know kind of the vibe of how they're working together a bit, both at a board meeting, maybe at their home office, but also out in the field. And this is being orchestrated by CEOs that are confident that their board can and will meet with their people well. The other, as a part of that, is an elevation of the role of CHRO into being a participant in the boardroom. The people call it the chief people person, partly because they're helping facilitate this understanding of people and their needs and wants and cares.
Yeah, no, not enough chief people officers, CHROs, whatever you want to call them. I hate both those names for that role.
Yeah.
And I used to do that role. I like to think of it as chief effectiveness officer,
There you go.
That's what
I'll take that.
I don't like human resources. Sounds horrible. But not enough of that seat is in the room, in the boardroom.
Mhm.
And not enough of us are on boards. Like I'm lucky that I'm on a few, but I think, and in the boardroom, a lot of the issues that you're talking about are this: scaling the organization. Do we have the right
Hmm.
people in the right roles? All of the things that come with, succession. I mean, compensation. I mean, these are all things that. So yes, sorry, I went off a little bit. I'm passionate about that, as you can tell. Okay, one of the things that we did at Netflix, and Reed was actually very good at this with the board. He invited the board to come observe him. And so they all were invited to our big quarterly meeting that all the directors and VPs and C-level people were at. And so that varied size over the years as we grew, but it was like a couple hundred, then it was like a couple thousand. And they would come and watch us perform in the meeting, and they actually participated themselves. And then he would ask the board members to come observe him in his meetings with us. And they would just be kind of a silent person in the room, and they would watch him interact with us in like his team meeting that he would have with all the C-level executives. And I've not seen CEOs go to that level, where they invite them in, but I think it was so healthy. But the biggest thing that it did for the board was it got them to understand him more. It got them to understand us more and the business more, because they saw how we operated versus sitting in a boardroom, once a quarter with the team. Like, you were seeing us in action.
Hmm.
Makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. As Byron was saying, it's like walking the floor or going to the studio or visiting the culture at Netflix. I mean, what a great way, especially because he's so effusive about wanting all of you as his C-suite to speak up. So they get to
Hmm.
see the context of the business, and then they get to see the pipeline. They get to
Right.
see the CPO and the CFO,
Right.
all of you interacting with the employees, not just at Analyst Day, but with the internal organization. So, and as to Byron's point, you have to really be fluent at both.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We're going to go into career confessions here in a second. But before we do, I always ask for our guests to leave like a nugget of advice. And this could be the best advice you have to give. And this could be for anyone. So we'll start with Byron. What is the advice that you want to leave anyone that's listening today?
Your personal life and your professional life should reflect one another, and you'll feel a lot more confident when you go into difficult situations if you are facilitating the growth of both similarly.
That's good. Can you top it, Mark? I don't know. That was a good one.
No, I won't top it for sure. I'll amplify the principle at work that Byron and I share very deeply in the work that we do, because we kind of believe in capitalism. We build companies that are for people and for customers and for communities to prosper. And to see your life, another way of describing what Byron's talking about is to live that mission and have as we talked about earlier, the hubris and the humility, to have this ambition to say, I can make things better. And in fact, we must make things better. And I'm the person who with a team can do that, and then realize that nobody does anything worthwhile alone. We have to have the humility to know that we need the help of great people to live that life and live that mission.
We so
And
do.
Jessica, you can see why I love Mark so much there.
I
He definitely exceeded my comments,
Yes.
and it felt like a compliment.
What a gift.
See? That's
Well,
why.
I'm now in love with both of you. I just, so hopefully you'll bring me in the fold because I want to hang out with you more. You're both lovely.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
you're welcome. So we're going to go into career confessions. I think my producer, Naman, picked this specifically for you two. It's perfect. So I've been told by my board that I'm a front runner for CEO, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not ready. Okay.
Excellent.
How do I assess my real readiness, and what steps should I take now to prove I can handle the top job? Well, first, I think they have to get your book.
Thank you for saying
Get the book, please.
that's what that's about.
Yeah.
And as I said, I want to applaud them for feeling that way, because that is probably the best indicator of long-term success as a CEO. And for those who choose also not to be the CEO for that reason, they end up having the extraordinary life that Byron was talking about. What's wrong with being the world's best CFO, CMO,
Nothing,
or
nothing.
director, or physician, or scientist? Again, it's not a prize. So if you're hitting pause to evaluate what your values are and what your mission is and how this would actually allow you to have a better life doing it, then just standing ovation, because it's usually the inverse. And you probably need actually less of our help because you're going to stop and take inventory. What do you think,
Yeah.
Byron?
I'm going to move my head to this direction, and you're going to see something Cheryl Palmer, who's the CEO of Taylor Morrison Homes, gave me. She's a good friend. And Jessica, I'm embarrassed to say it's from Apple, but right there,
Where? That sign?
that's the Ted Lasso sign that says believe.
Love Ted Lasso.
And the point is that I do love that, and I would recommend everybody watch that one. But
I know,
because
even though it's
one-
not on
that-
Netflix, I
it's
still
not on
like
Netflix,
it.
so only watch that one segment, not the whole show. But it is important that you have a sense of belief in oneself in an authentic way. And I emphasize one of the troubles where people become depressed is this struggle and stress of the juxtaposition between authentic and inauthentic. And that's why I say public and private, that you're consistent and that there's a belief in self.
Yeah.
And a part of that belief in self is finding your peers and having a peer group that can be someone that you love deeply, that you're a partner, wife, whatever. And it can be a professional peer group that's providing authentic advice and speaking into your life in an important and honest way.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And we didn't even get to the topic of mental health in this role, because I do think it can take a toll on you. And if you don't have that group of people that you can confide in, and also I think a group of people that are experiencing what you're experiencing, because it's hard. I don't know, even though I wasn't the CEO, I had a very big job at a very big company, and it was hard for my husband to understand the pressures of that sometime. But if I talked to someone else in a similar situation, they would kind of get it. And I think CEOs need other CEOs to talk to, because nobody else understands it unless they're going through it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you two, goodness gracious, thank you so much. I enjoyed this thoroughly. Okay, everybody can find the book where books are sold. Yes, Amazon, all the others.
Yeah.
And then it's on them all. Yes. And where can they find you two if they want to find out more about you?
Byron?
I'm at Nasdaq, and it's fairly easy to find
Never heard
people
of
at Nasdaq, but I'm online and active, and particularly I spend my time focused on working with boards around their self-assessment process primarily.
Awesome. Mark?
And you'll find me at the Chief Executive Alliance, which is an organization I created that has the purpose to create a community for chief executives. Many people do join YPO. This is the next level. And so this is the YCEO, only we're not young anymore.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well,
that's
you
where
look young. You look good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just so you guys know that are listening, Mark is a CEO whisperer. So if you need some whispering for your CEO, give him a call.
And I'll even be louder on demand.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you two so much. It was just a delight. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica, thank you.